I've just put on there what repair stands for, because apart from anything else, I can never remember exactly what it stands for, but it is about reducing pre-registration attrition and improving retention of our learners on courses. So just a bit of background then. So in the Northwest, I'm not sure where everyone here is from, but in the Northwest region, we have last year there was an offer out to across the systems for funding to look at projects to support the retention of nursing, midwives and allied health professional pre-registration learners. That programme is quite large, and it includes 2 Northwest AHP Repair Fellows. There was £500,000 allocated to the Northwest for projects, and we are looking forward to a conference in March that's going to share what those projects were in fact doing. It's just to say that each project, the funding submissions that were allowed were up to £20,000 per project. So we had a cap on what we could bid for, but we were successful in Cheshire, Merseyside in obtaining £20,000. The Repair Fellows in the Northwest have been conducting some work for the last sort of 12 months, and they focus their efforts particularly around occupational therapy and operating department practitioner learners, because the data suggests that we have a higher attrition rate in the Northwest for those 2 areas, to those 2 courses. That includes the BSc, MSc and apprenticeship routes. Although the data suggests that for apprentices, the attrition rate is less than for those who are direct entry. What they did was they conducted some focus group discussions with volunteers from both of those discipline groups. And in doing that, they were able to identify some very key themes that were coming out around why learners are leaving courses early. Their final reports haven't been released yet. We're just expecting those, but we have been very much in collaborative working with those Repair Fellows. So in Cheshire, in Cheshire Merseyside, we were awarded £20,000. We put in our bid, which was to look at both OT and ODP students, and we split that £20,000 into 2 pots of 10. So we've had £10,000 dedicated to OT, and the other £10,000 has gone to combine with a project in Greater Manchester looking at ODPs, and we have developed some virtual reality videos for that. And I'm here today to talk about what we did with the OT funding. So I don't know if you can see this on screen. Some of it is a bit blurry just because of the way it's copied across, but these were the key themes that OT learners were identifying as reasons for why they might be leaving courses. And some of those are really quite interesting for OT. And by the way, they were very different in many respects to what they found with operating department practitioner students. So one of the key things was around career literacy. So people were talking about the difficulty that often they thought they understood the OT role, and then they arrived on courses and went out on placement and found that they didn't. And I guess that's probably easy for us to understand looking back, because we see that OT is applicable and works in so many different groups with lots of different clinical areas in lots of different roles. It's not as straightforward as perhaps people think. And so one of the quotes there is that I think a lot of people dropped out because of a lack of understanding of OT, because they signed up and they didn't actually know what OT was. And I'm at the end of my 3rd year and I'm like, wow, I didn't know what OT was when I started. So there's some theming around career literacy. In the Northwest, we get quite a few international students. So, for example, we do get them from the Republic of Ireland coming across to universities here, and they are classed as international students. And with costs of living changing and all that sort of thing, finance was identified for many of those students as a key. Some of that were leaving because of cost of living. This project determined there probably wasn't much we could actually do about that, but it's worth remembering that finance is an issue. Support, people spoke about how to access support, that there were still students coming from the impact of COVID. They were experiencing health and mental health issues of their own. They might have families in the background, they might be carers. And some of that was about how to seek support in a supportive way. So that was one key area that was identified. Program intensity was another one. So for some of the students, they are on master's courses, they're quite condensed. And of course they understand that when they join those courses, but the reality of trying to balance life and doing that course has been quite tricky for some people. Not having that breathing space to learn and to just to take back time and reflect. Some people have mentioned that. And then the preparedness for what they called physical placement. So just actually understanding perhaps the travel, the difficulty in getting to and from, what that might do in terms of that breathing space, and understanding what might they be doing when they're on placement. And then some comments around that flaky bridge preceptorship, so moving from training into becoming a registered clinician. Placements was another key area. So some of the comments were around that feeling of welcoming and belonging, arriving in very busy teams, very busy environments, having the pace changing quite quickly for students, not quite necessarily understanding what that might mean for them, but positive comments around being able to access inspirational educators, but also then looking for a more personalised and flexible approach, which I think can be difficult at times when people are arriving into quite acutely stressful environments. And again, the cost and logistics of accessing placements, but then whether people were sharing that with their educators, that's a theme that comes out. That goes back to the support thing, that people feel that and educators perhaps feeding back that some of the focus groups were with educators as well, were around students not sharing that information early enough on placement. And the comment there is about one. Oh, sorry, I got some feedback then. The comment there about one learner was having to get 2 trains and a bus and then walk to the placement, and doing that 5 times a week, which was on top of having to do that placement as well. Just having that recognition around that. Learner background was the last theme that was picked out. So this was something around cultural competence, it being a 2-way process, the complexity behind the scenes and people holding back a little bit psychologically, perhaps, academic challenges for some people, and then expectations that people had around what they were, that they had high expectations around what they would be able to achieve on placement. So we took those key themes and we established a task and finish group to try and further understand what was going on for those learners. We had a broad membership in that task and finish group. So we had, during the early stages of this project, we actually had 2 learners on a leadership placement within the AHP faculty, and they led on quite a lot of this, which was really good. We had some clinical staff, educators, we had HEI representatives, and one of the repair fellows had joined the group as well, so that we could get more detail and progress from them around the project they were doing. So we then looked around to think, well, be the resources that we could develop for this. And we knew that the videos were being developed in Greater Manchester for ODP students, but we didn't feel that that was quite appropriate, and we couldn't think of particular scenarios. Those videos are based around scenarios. And so some work was done to explore what podcasts might look like, and the OT learners that we had on placement did some research and presented options to the task and finish group, and the task and finish group felt that that was very appropriate. We also had connectivity into the University of Chester because they had a programme of developing a podcast series which already had a title and a method of what those podcasts could look like. And it was agreed that we would connect in with the University of Chester around that. Importantly then was to determine about how these podcasts would actually be used. And so the HIE representatives, HEIE reps, apologies, on the group were able to have been working with us to identify people to undertake volunteering to do a podcast, but also looking at how they're going to use those podcasts moving forward and try to embed them into their pre-placement modules. We've done a final, this project is coming to an end now, and we've done a final report, and an evaluation is expected shortly. So just a timeline of what we've done. So this shows some of the progress we've made in terms of how the times we've done things. As I mentioned, we've connected in with our Enabling Effective Learning Environments programme hosted through the University of Chester. They had a nurse working with them who came up with the idea of developing a series of podcasts called Your First of Everything. And this is, it's not just OTs, this is a broader range of health staff contributing to that. Her idea came from when she was a nursing student in working in the emergency department. One of the patients had a cardiac arrest, and it was the first time she'd seen and experienced and been involved with that. And on reflection, she felt she had experiences to share. And so she wanted to develop a podcast series to look at that. So the podcasts that I'm talking about are part of a bigger series available. We procured a media company to record and edit and publish those podcasts. We've had recruitment and they're now live. We have 13 of them currently that are live on Spotify, Apple and Amazon. So just to give you a flavour of those podcasts, you'll see here the titles of those. So everybody's phrased it as your first of something, but you'll see that we've got people talking about experiences being a mature student, and we've got some international students speaking. We've got students with health conditions, so a student talking about being a mature student. One of the ones is very fascinating about someone who'd wanted to be an OT for many years, and describes how she contacted a university and they just started their intake, and so they said to her, if you can come tomorrow, we'll interview you. And so she went for an interview, and the following day she was sat in a lecture theatre, and she talks about the speed of how that came about. The numbers on the side are our latest listening numbers from just before Christmas, and because the podcast platforms do allow us to count those. So what I'll just show you the last slide. Is about then what are the benefits of the podcast. So we are hoping to promote them around opportunities for OT learners to listen, reflect and learn from the experiences of their peers on the challenges of academic life and working in the NHS, and what others might have done to overcome those. We're hoping that OT learners will be feeling better prepared for their studies and for the greater awareness of the realities of work. And the universities themselves have then gained some valuable resources to share with OT learners in pre-placement modules. On the right-hand side, there is the QR code that takes you to those relevant platforms for listening to those podcasts. And I'd like to just stress that they're very authentic conversations and really interesting to listen to. So we wanted to promote them and share them as opportunities for students and educators to listen and use those resources more widely. We are hoping to record some more, and we do have about another 8 to 10 volunteers lined up. One of the things you may note if you do actually listen to the podcast is that there are no men. So we're trying to identify some male OTs to be involved with that. So I'm aware of time and I need to move on to my other presentation, and probably questions will come, but you will, I presume you will get these slides, and the last one is just about our contact details. Yes, Claire's just prompted me to say that the podcasts themselves do have transcripts, and they have been currently listed and available on our website. She's just put the link in the chat, and this is our website. If you scroll down here, you'll see that they're all listed and you can download them as a transcript. Okay, I'll just stop sharing my screen while I switch PowerPoint slides. Right, so the second thing we were going to talk to you about today is another piece of work that we've done in Cheshire and Merseyside. Now, this is a more long-term piece of work. This has been developed since about 2020, and it's our AHP Practice Educator Toolkit. This is something that is available on the Learning Hub, and I'll show you it very quickly shortly. But we're hoping to connect the podcasts into the Learning Hub as well. We'll be uploading information onto the Learning Hub about this. These are not my slides. This is Emily's presentation. She was not able to join us today, but I'm sure if you've got questions, we can ask Emily about that later. So the Practice Education Toolkit is growing and has been developed in Cheshire and Merseyside, but is available to all. So it is on the Learning Hub, and that means that everyone can access it. And it's a series of ready-made strategies and tools which are tried and tested to help increase the number of students on placement while maintaining a quality learning environment. It's got a range of products and tools, forms, videos, all sorts of things on there that can be utilised. It was initially funded and paid for through the sort of clinical placement expansion programme, but is now being sustainably supported across Cheshire and Merseyside by the Toolkit Educators Champions Group, of which Emily is the chair. And so it was originally around expansion of placement capacity, looking at how to support educators to expand into not just that one-on-one traditional route, but looking at options and tools to support. So, for example, there's a whole suite of video. Now, they're not all OT specific, I will say, but there are videos in there that can be looked at multidisciplinary, of course, but there are videos in there around different clinical groups or different patients and their journeys with wraparound learning. So the video itself might be 15 minutes in length, but the idea is the student would pause it and go away and reflect and do some work and then come back to it. And then there's examples of assessments, clinical assessments in a clinic setting, for example. So there's a range of videos on there. There is also some suggested timetables for having multiple students at once, examples of peer learning, information about leadership placements, information about how to run and manage a hub and spoke model, and some induction activities. Also in there, we have got some, these are some examples of handbooks and little guides that are available in there for download. These have all been fairly recently reviewed and rebranded and re-put up onto the Learning Hub, and also then looking at how to support greener AHP by making them downloadable PDFs. To access the Practice toolkit, what you would need is a Learning Hub account. So I'll just show you what it looks like. Just bear with me, I've got it ready to go. Okay, now if you don't have a Learning Hub account, then it's easy to set one up. I've got one set up. You just excuse me, I need to move my computer. And what you can do, if you just join the Learning Hub account, you can then search for Cheshire and Merseyside AHP faculty, and you'll see it's here. And then if you scroll down, there are other resources here. So we have recently published something about unconscious bias and inclusive recruitment. There is some information and introductory document to the toolkit. We've then got tools listed here. Here are some example PDF documents. I'm not going to open many of them because I'm aware of time. We've also then got a link to where all the videos are located. Microsoft Sway, I don't know if you've come across it, but it's a great tool. And if I just open that, you'll see examples of what the videos are. So we've got some of these would be clinical related, and some would be discipline related. Now you'll note that there isn't anything occupational therapy here. However, we probably won't be able to record any more currently, but some of these are quite useful. For example, the frailty one is around shows an individual who falls at home and then he's admitted. So paramedic comes, and then they're taken to hospital, and they're in emergency department. There are then concerns around this person's ability to consent. So there's consent assessment done, and then it looks at the role of the physio and the OT in that person's rehabilitation. But there's sort of wraparound learning opportunities embedded within that, so people can pause the video and go away and learn. And all of that is around looking at potentially learners working from home on a half a day a week, for example, where they've got activities to go away and look at, so that they're perhaps not on site, or if there's downtime, that educators have access to resources that they can use. Okay, so the toolkit is there and it's available for all. You don't need to work in Cheshire and Merseyside just to access that. Finally, then, you'll see that the tools themselves, as I say, they have been recently redone and re-uploaded, and they're interactable, so you can select the things down the side which will give you easy access to those links. And the tools then are looking at this range of different things here. We're also looking further to connect with the 2 other ICSs in our in the northwest, that's Greater Manchester and Lancashire, South Cumbria, and we've started some work to look at how the toolkit can support long arm supervision, where educators might be then supporting learners in private and voluntary sector organisations and third sector in those sort of role emerging placements. So that's early work that's been done but is underway. And the last slide is just again our contact details. So hopefully I can stop sharing, and that's the end of our presentation.